I'm 85 years old and I'm alone. Not alone in the sense that I don't have family. I have two children. I have five grandchildren. They call, they visit when they can. But I'm alone in the way that matters most. All of my friends are dead. Every single person I considered a real friend, someone who knew me when I was young, someone who remembered my husband, someone who understood my life without explanation. They're all gone, and I'm still here. My name is Eleanor. I've been a widow for 12 years. And I need to tell you something that nobody talks about. Something I didn't understand until it was far too late to do anything about it. If you don't make enough friends while you can, you will outlive them all and spend your final years completely alone. And that loneliness, that specific kind of loneliness, where everyone who truly knew you is gone, it's worse than anything I could have imagined. The circle that kept shrinking. When I was in my 50s, I had a solid group of friends, not hundreds of people, not even dozens, but maybe 10 or 12 women I considered real friends. Women I'd known for years. Women I could call at 3 in the morning if something went wrong. There was Margaret, who lived 2 houses down. We met when our kids were in elementary school together. We carpooled for years. She had this terrible sense of direction and would get lost even driving to places she'd been 100 times. We laughed about it constantly. There was Joyce, from my book club. We'd been meeting every month since 1973. Joyce could remember every book we'd ever read and who said what about each one. She had this incredible memory. She was the keeper of our shared history. There was Sandra, my college roommate. We stayed in touch for over 40 years. She lived 3 states away, but we talked on the phone every Sunday morning without fail. Those calls were sacred. Nothing interrupted them. There was Linda, from church. She had the most infectious laugh I've ever heard. She could make anything funny, even funerals, especially funerals. Actually, she'd whisper something inappropriate, and I'd have to bite my lip to keep from laughing out loud. There was Patricia, my neighbor for 25 years. We had coffee together every Thursday morning without fail. Rain, snow, holidays, didn't matter. Thursday morning, her kitchen table, coffee, and whatever pastries one of us had picked up. There was Helen, who worked with me at the library for 15 years. She knew more about books than anyone I've ever met. She could recommend the perfect book for any mood, any person, any situation. She introduced me to authors I never would have found on my own. And there were others. Karen, who taught aerobics at the community center where I took classes for years. Diane, who lived in the apartment below me before I bought my house. Betty, who volunteered with me at the hospital. Ruth, who I met through my husband's work and somehow became one of my closest friends, despite having nothing in common except that we both married engineers. These weren't casual acquaintances. These were the women I called when my mother died. The women who threw me a surprise party for my 50th birthday. The women who sat with me in the hospital when my husband Tom had his first heart attack. They were my people, and now they're all gone. Margaret died in 2008. Breast cancer. She fought for 2 years. I was with her at the end. She was 72. Joyce died in 2011. Stroke. She was at book club. She was in the middle of talking about the book we'd just finished when she stopped mid-sentence, looked confused, and collapsed. The ambulance came, but she died 3 days later without ever waking up. She was 75. Sandra died in 2013. Car accident. A drunk driver hit her head-on a Sunday afternoon. She was on her way home from church. Our last phone call had been that morning. She was 74. Linda died in 2015. Heart failure. She'd had heart problems for years, but never took them seriously. God will take me when he's ready, she used to say. Apparently, he was ready. She was 76. Patricia moved to Florida in 2016 to live with her daughter. We talked on the phone a few times, then lost touch. I heard she died in 2019 from a neighbor, but I wasn't told until after the funeral. Nobody thought to call me. We'd lived next door to each other for 25 years, and nobody thought to call me. Helen died in 2020. COVID. She caught it at the library, where she still volunteered 3 days a week. She was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Nobody was allowed to visit. She died alone. She was 79. Karen died in 2017. Cancer. Diane died in 2018. Pneumonia. Betty died in 2021. Alzheimer's complications. Ruth died in 2023. Just old age. Her heart gave out. I am 85 years old, and I am the only one left. What I didn't understand in my 60s, when I was 65, I had this comfortable assumption that my friendships were permanent. These women had been in my life for decades. We'd been through so much together. Marriages, divorces, births, deaths, moves, job changes, health scares. We'd seen each other at our best and worst. I assumed we'd all grow old together, sitting on porches complaining about our grandchildren, laughing about the past. I didn't realize how fast people start dying once you hit your 70s. I didn't realize that the window for making new friends closes much earlier than you think. And I didn't realize that I needed more friends than I had. Many more, because here's what happens. People die. Not all at once, but steadily. One every year or two, and every time someone dies, your circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller, until one day you look around and realize there's no circle left, there's just you, and by then it's too late to build a new one. When Margaret died, I still had 11 friends. It felt sad, but manageable. I had other people. When Joyce died, I had 10 friends. Still okay, still a solid group. When Sandra died, I had 9, starting to feel thin, but not desperate. By the time Linda died, I was down to 8, and I started to feel it. Started to feel the circle shrinking in a way that made me nervous. But I still didn't do anything about it. I still thought 8 friends was enough. By my late 70s, I was down to 4 friends left, and I started to panic. But by then, making new friends felt impossible. I was too old, too tired, too set in my ways. And then those 4 became 3, then 2, then 1, and then none. Why I didn't make more friends. Looking back, I had so many opportunities to expand my friendships in my 50s and 60s. I could have joined more clubs. I could have volunteered more. I could have said yes to more invitations from acquaintances who might have become real friends, but I didn't. I told myself I had enough friends. I told myself I was too busy. I told myself I'd do it later, after I retired, after Tom and I finished renovating the house, after life slowed down a little. I was comfortable with the friends I had. I didn't feel like I needed more, and that was my biggest mistake. I didn't understand that friendships have a shelf life. Not because the friendship ends, but because people die. If you have 10 close friends at age 60, you might have 5 at age 75. You might have 2 at age 80. You might have none at age 85. The math is brutal, and I didn't do the math. There was a woman at church, Carol, who tried to befriend me when I was in my mid-60s. She was about 10 years younger than me. She invited me to join her Bible study group. She asked if I wanted to go to lunch. She was friendly and persistent. I was polite but distant. I already had my church friend, Linda. I didn't need another one. Carol eventually stopped trying, and now I wish I'd said yes. Because Carol is still alive. She's 75 and still active at church. I see her sometimes. We nod to each other, but we're not friends. That ship sailed 30 years ago. There was a neighbor who moved in across the street when I was 68. Her name was Anne. She was retired, maybe 62 or 63. She was friendly. She invited me over for coffee multiple times. She suggested we take walks together. I always had an excuse. I was busy with my existing friends. I was comfortable with my routine. I didn't need a new friend. Anne still lives across the street. She's in her late 70s now. We wave to each other. We make polite small talk when we're both getting our mail, but we never became friends. And now I wish we had, because at least I'd have someone, the loneliness. No one talks about. People talk about losing a spouse. They talk about the grief, the emptiness, the adjustment to living alone after decades of partnership. But nobody talks about losing all of your friends. Nobody talks about what it's like to be the last one standing. My children love me. My daughter Susan is wonderful. She's attentive and caring. My son Michael is good too. In his way, my grandchildren are lovely when I see them. But they didn't know Tom. They don't remember what I was like when I was 40. They don't understand the context of my life. When I talk about the past, they listen politely, but they don't really get it. They weren't there. They didn't live it. My grandchildren especially. They're kind, but I'm just their old grandmother. They don't know me as a person. They don't know what I was like before I got old. The friends I had, they were there. They knew Tom. They knew me before I was a grandmother, before I was old, before I was widowed. They remembered the person I used to be. Margaret remembered me at 35, young and energetic, chasing after three small children, and somehow managing to keep my sanity. Joyce remembered me at 40, when I went back to school to get my library science degree, and was terrified I was too old and too stupid. Sandra remembered me at 20, in college, scared and homesick and trying to figure out who I was. Linda remembered me at 55, going through menopause and completely losing my mind for about 2 years. Patricia remembered me at 60, newly retired and panicking about what to do with myself. Helen remembered me as a competent professional, someone who knew what she was doing, someone who mattered. Those memories are gone now. The people who held them are dead. And now the only people who know me are people who only know old Eleanor, elderly Eleanor, widow Eleanor, grandmother Eleanor. Nobody knows young Eleanor anymore. Nobody remembers her. And I am so alone. The mistake you're making right now. If you're in your 50s or 60s right now, you probably think you have enough friends. You probably have a solid group of people you've known for years. You probably feel like your social life is set, and you're making the same mistake I made. You're not preparing for the fact that half of those people are going to be dead in 20 years. You're not building a wider network that can absorb the losses. You're not making younger friends who will still be around when you're 80. You're being complacent, just like I was, and unless you do something about it now, you're going to end up exactly where I am, alive, reasonably healthy, and completely alone. What you should be doing instead. Here's what I wish I'd done in my 60s. I wish I'd made friends with people younger than me. Not just people my age, but people in their 40s and 50s. People who would still be around when I hit my 80s. I wish I'd joined more groups, more book clubs, more volunteer organizations, more community activities. Not because I needed more social activities, but because I needed more potential friendships. I wish I'd been more intentional about maintaining friendships. When Patricia moved to Florida, I let the friendship fade because it was inconvenient to stay in touch. Long distance phone calls felt like work. I should have fought harder to keep that connection. I wish I'd said yes more often. When acquaintances invited me to things, I often said no because I was tired or busy or comfortable at home with Tom. I should have said yes more. Some of those acquaintances might have become real friends if I'd given them a chance. I wish I'd understood that friendships aren't just about enjoyment. They're about survival. They're about having people who will still be there when you're old and everyone else is gone. I wish I'd been less picky. I had this idea that I only wanted to be friends with people I had a lot in common with, people who shared my interests, my values, my sense of humor. That was stupid. Friendship doesn't require perfect compatibility. It just requires showing up. The visits that don't fill the void. My daughter Susan visits me every Sunday. She's a good daughter. She brings groceries, asks about my week, tells me about her life, her job, her kids, but the visits are brief. An hour, maybe an hour and a half, and then she has to go. She has her own family, her own responsibilities, her own life to get back to. My son Michael visits maybe once a month. He lives farther away. He calls more often than he visits. The calls are short. How are you doing, Mom? Everything okay? Great. I'll call again soon. My grandchildren visit on holidays and birthdays. They're polite. They hug me. They tell me about school or work or their friends. But they're young. They have their own lives, their own friends, their own interests. They don't really want to spend time with their 85-year-old grandmother. And I don't blame any of them. I really don't. But these visits, as nice as they are, don't fill the void left by losing all of my friends. Because family visits out of obligation. Friends visit because they want to. Family tolerates you. Friends actually enjoy your company. Family loves you in spite of who you are. Friends love you because of who you are. And when you lose all of your friends, you lose the people who chose you. You're left with people who are stuck with you. And that's not the same thing at all. When Margaret was alive, she'd call me just to chat. No reason, no agenda. Just because she thought of me and wanted to talk. When Joyce was alive, we'd spend hours discussing books, ideas, life, real conversations about real things. When Sandra was alive, those Sunday morning phone calls were the highlight of my week. We talked about everything. Nothing was off limits. Those kinds of conversations don't happen with family. With family, the conversations are surface level. How are you feeling? Do you need anything? Here's what's happening with us. Okay, we have to go now. The days that all feel the same. I wake up every morning around 7. My body doesn't let me sleep later than that anymore. No matter how tired I am, I make coffee. I eat toast with butter. I take my medications, 7 different pills every morning. I read the newspaper if I remember to bring it in. Sometimes I forget, and it sits outside until Susan brings it in on Sunday. I do the crossword puzzle. I'm slower at it now than I used to be. Words don't come as quickly. I watch the morning news. The same anchors every day. The same format. The same stories, just with different details. I go for a short walk if the weather is nice and my knees aren't too bad. Around the block, maybe 10 minutes. I used to walk for an hour. Now 10 minutes exhausts me. I come back. I rest. I make lunch, usually soup or a sandwich, something simple. I read in the afternoon, or I try to. Sometimes I read the same page 3 times because I can't concentrate. Or I watch television, game shows, mostly, or old movies, nothing too complicated. I make dinner, usually something small. I'm not very hungry anymore. Eating alone takes away your appetite. I eat at the kitchen table by myself. I used to eat in the living room with the TV on, but that felt too depressing. At least at the table, I can pretend I'm having a normal meal. I watch more television in the evening. The news again, then whatever's on. I go to bed around 9, sometimes earlier if there's nothing worth staying awake for. And then I wake up and do it all again, every day. The same routine. For years now, when I had friends, the days were different. Margaret and I would take walks together and actually talk about things. Joyce and I would go to book club once a month, and it gave me something to look forward to. Sandra and I would have those Sunday morning calls that made the whole day better. Linda and I would try new recipes and share them. Patricia and I would have our Thursday morning coffee and gossip about the neighborhood. There were spontaneous phone calls. There were lunch dates. There were shopping trips and movies, and just sitting together, doing nothing but enjoying the company. Now there's just me and my routine, and the television, and the silence. The regret that keeps me awake. I lie in bed at night, and I think about all the opportunities I missed. I think about the time Margaret asked me to join her yoga class, and I said no, because I thought yoga was silly. She went alone for years. I could have gone with her. I think about the time Joyce invited me to a play at the community theater, and I said no because Tom and I had plans to watch a movie at home. We could have watched that movie any night. I only had so many chances to spend time with Joyce. I think about all the times Sandra suggested I come visit her instead of just talking on the phone, and I always said it was too far, too expensive, too complicated. It was a 3-hour drive. That's nothing. I could have gone dozens of times. I think about the time Linda wanted me to volunteer with her at a soup kitchen, and I said no because it wasn't my thing. Who cares if it wasn't my thing? It was her thing. I could have done it with her. I think about all the Thursday mornings I cancelled on Patricia because I was tired or didn't feel like it. How many Thursday mornings did we actually have left? Not as many as I thought. I think about the neighbor Anne who tried so hard to befriend me, and I just didn't. I could have a friend right now, living across the street, but I was too comfortable with what I already had. What 85 actually feels like. People think being 85 means you're wise and peaceful and content with your life. I'm not any of those things. I'm lonely. I'm bored. I'm invisible. I go to the grocery store and people look right through me. I'm just an old woman in their way. They push past me. They don't hold doors. They act like I don't exist. I go to the doctor and they talk to me like I'm a child. They speak slowly and loudly as if I'm stupid. Some of them talk about me like I'm not even in the room. She needs to take this twice a day. Make sure she understands. I exist, but I don't really matter. Not to anyone except my immediate family, and even to them, I'm more of an obligation than a joy. I had a life. I had friends. I had purpose. I had conversations that mattered and relationships that meant something. Now I have doctor's appointments and television and long empty days where nothing happens and no one calls. And I know I'm lucky. I know there are people who have it worse. I have my health mostly. I can still walk. I can still think clearly. I have enough money. I have family who cares, even if they're busy. But I'm still alone. And that loneliness is crushing in ways I can't fully describe. It's waking up every morning knowing that no one is going to call. No one is going to text. No one is going to knock on my door just to say hello. It's sitting in a room full of memories of people who are all dead. It's talking to myself because there's no one else to talk to. It's going days without having a real conversation with anyone. It's forgetting what it feels like to laugh with someone. My warning to you, if you're reading this and you're in your 50s or 60s, please listen to me. Don't assume your friendships will last forever. They won't. People die sooner than you think. Don't assume you have enough friends. You don't. You need more than you think. You need a buffer. You need redundancy. Don't wait to make new friends. Do it now while you still have the energy and the opportunity and the social skills. Don't let friendships fade just because they require effort. Fight for them. Maintain them. They are more important than you realize. And for God's sake, make friends with people younger than you. Make friends with people in their 40s and 50s and even 60s when you're in your 50s, because those are the people who will still be around when you're 85. I didn't do any of these things, and now I'm paying the price. I'm 85 years old, and I'm alone, completely alone, and there's nothing I can do about it now. It's too late for me, but it's not too late for you. So do it. Join that club. Say yes to that invitation. Make that phone call. Reach out to that acquaintance. Make the effort before it's too late. Because one day, you're going to be sitting where I'm sitting, looking back at all the opportunities you missed, all the friendships you didn't prioritize, all the connections you let slip away. And by then, just like me, it will be too late. Don't make my mistake. The loneliness of being the last one left is unbearable, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone.